Welcome to another week. So this week it's pre-accelerate here. So we're going to talk about Pure Storage a little bit today.
Yeah.
Naveen's actually doing a keynote next week for our customers who want to go see him. But
Not terrified.
it's going to be about a service, right? So Evergreen One is a service, and we're going to give a little bit more of an origin story of why we're doing what we're doing and what we're doing. But I guess kind of just to level set, Naveen, what do you think a service is? How would you define a service?
So I've learned a lot through my journey here, especially as part of the Evergreen, BU and stuff like that. So I do have a more positive view on it, but I'm going to rewind my own thoughts and I'm going to just kind of play out, because some of it I still go back to, which is if I'm going to be a skeptic, and what I think a lot of people think a service is it's a subscription, right? I don't think that's the real definition, but
well, what is the difference between a subscription and a service?
well, so let me just say hypothetically, I'm gonna posit what I thought it was and what I think a lot of people think it is. So a subscription is like you subscribe to Amazon Prime and you pay monthly and you get access to, let's say, Amazon Prime Video. But to me, it's something that, as a consumer, it's something that shows up on my credit card bill monthly, and I pay it. And I have like now 40 of these services, and they just accumulate. And maybe the simplest, most straightforward service I have is I'm a Dollar Shave Club member. I pay them, whatever, $8 a month. They send me blades every month, and I don't have to think about buying blades. But I also don't pay $40 a chunk when I buy them, right? So it's just like a recurring charge, and I guess I do get something for that, right? But I think as a consumer, the thing that I mostly think about is that recurring charge. I look at the credit card bill. It's like, how many services do I have? I want to have how many subscriptions do I have? I want to have fewer of those.
Let's dig into that blade situation, right? Because there is a subscription there. You are paying for blades.
Yep.
But the service, I think, in that is delivery. Like, you're actually not driving to buy the blade. So the delivery portion is the service.
And actually, I would argue for that one, because I could kind of defend it. I also don't have to think about ever having blades, right? It's like, I'm just going to have a continuous. Turns out I shave regularly, and I'm going to need these.
It's
regularly.
predictable.
It's predictable, and it's kind of annoying when I run out. So I'm just going to never run out, and I'm going to pay, a predictable cost.
Well, I'll give you an India example, because when I was in India with my family, they just were like, hey, the guy's coming to shave you this morning. So, I actually had a service where someone came to the house and was like, with the straight razor.
Yeah.
And that was just a daily service.
Yeah.
So that's
fair.
That's a step up from your blade as a service.
And actually, what's interesting is that I think it's probably worth us kind of separating the concept of service and subscription, because I think they actually get conjoined a lot of times.
Yeah.
Because I would argue that's like almost the epitome of a white glove service, right? It's like, right? You probably only paid him once. You're not like he doesn't have like your credit card and not going to be a recurring charge, but it was definitely a service. You had to go nowhere, sat where you were, and before you were not shaved, after you were shaved.
Yeah.
And that's definitely a service.
Yeah.
But it's not a subscription, right?
Could be a subscription.
It could be.
Yeah.
And so I think to a lot of people who think about services, it's the subscription angle.
Yeah.
And that comes with pros and cons.
Yeah. So what are the attributes, right? Like, how would you, from a technical definition standpoint, where do you draw the line of subscription and service?
Subscription is a financial vehicle, right?
Okay.
It's like let's go back to the Dollar Shave Club one, because I think it's like the simplest service you could think of. Without it, I would go to, personally, like Sam's Club and buy a bunch of blades, all bulk. And I would pay like $40 or $50, and I'd literally have like my year's supply of blades, but I'd have to remember to buy them before I run out. And it was just, I had to make a trip. It was not a huge hassle, but it was a little bit of a tax. And the service, I'm getting into the subscription, the service side. That's how I'm paying for it. I'm paying for it when I want to buy a bulk of these things. The subscription angle is it's on my credit card every month. It's a predictable cost. I know that every month I'm going to pay for this. Like when I'm doing my home budgeting, I can literally put a little, row for Dollar Shave Club, and that's going to be predictable. And my salary is predictable. My Subscription is predictable. Those things I can easily make a budget.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting when you think about financial versus operational, right? Because subscription is very financial. I agree with you. Like, yeah, you're paying a recurring fee, but I think there are even are there services that are not subscriptions?
When you mentioned someone coming to your home as a barber, basically, I was like, that feels a lot like a service that's not a subscription.
But it could be.
It
right?
could be a subscription.
So I could say, I'm going to pay you $30 a month, come to my home every day.
100%.
Right? Then it's a subscription and a service.
100%.
Or I'm going to have you come to my house every day, and when you come, I may pay you per trip, right? Now, that's not a service, that's not a subscription,
But it is.
it's a utilization, right? Because when you think about subscription, people are like, okay, here's my recurring fee.
Right.
There's pay as you go,
That's true.
right?
Yeah.
So that's more of a pay as you go model. So when you think financial, there's capital investment. I've paid a thing as a one-time fee. There's a subscription, which is a recurring thing. I'm going to bill you monthly for this thing. And there's pay as you go, which is event-based.
100%. Yeah.
Right?
No, but I mean, so
They're all financial vehicles.
and to me, and this is where I still haven't quite understood the difference, and so I'll posit some that our audience don't. The pay as you go, where you said, okay, I'm going to pay you when it happens, versus what you just called capital.
Mm-hmm.
To me, from a budgeting perspective, as a consumer, feel very similar. And I think that as an individual, it is the same in my financial model, right? It's like let's now talk about a computer, right? If I buy a computer today, that's a capital expense.
Mm-hmm.
But unless I'm a business, it's no different than if there was some bizarre, actually some cell phone companies do this, right? It's like, okay, every 2 years you pay us $500 and you can get a phone, right? To me, that's still it's not a predictable cost. I pay it once in a while. I get an item from it. And one, I think it's from an accounting perspective, it's capital. From another one, it's pay as you go. Can you help me as a consumer understand the difference between those two?
Well, so I'm going to do it in a different context with an easier to use analogy. Are you familiar with pay-as-you-go insurance?
No.
Okay, so there are companies that do this. There are people who don't have cars,
Okay.
right? Or they may have a car, but they might not sign up to Progressive or Allstate or Geico or some insurance plan. And it's a per-trip insurance. So every time you get in your car, you say, I'm going from here to here, and you buy a per-trip insurance.
Okay.
Like that exists.
Huh.
Now, mainly it exists in San Francisco, where there's actually Uber for cars, where you can put your car on there, and then someone can go pick up your car, buy a per-trip insurance, and do it and never own a car, right? Like that whole economy exists in San Francisco.
Okay, my mind has been blown in very several ways. But, okay.
But you're driving, right? So you're not getting Uber is a service. Someone's driving for you.
Right.
If you're driving, it's a per-trip financial vehicle. You know what I mean? So, and not a subscription. It's a one-time event. It's utilization-based.
It is. But what would be, I think that's what's challenging, I think, to a lot of people, and myself included, is I think the difference between pay-as-you-go, because I think if we're going to talk about service, we have to talk about the financial side and the actual experience side.
Yeah, operational experience.
Operational side. On the financial side, I think the difference between pay-as-you-go and capital only really materializes in an accounting world.
Yeah, fairly. I would agree with that. It's just I'm reserving all these dollars up front, right, as one capital thing to cover blah. And that thing is typically not variable. It's like I bought 100 units of things, I got 100 units of things. Pay as you go is meh, when I need the next unit, I'll pay for the next unit. You know?
And then there's also another aspect, which I don't think we need to get into, but I do think that, this gets into just laws and rules and taxes, right? When you have capital expense, then there's rules about how you can depreciate and so on and so forth. Yeah. And that's where it goes beyond my knowledge of how to make the trade-off.
Yeah.
But my understanding is when it's pay as you go, there is no concept of depreciation. You're not actually getting a thing, so you would never depreciate it. And therefore, it's very straightforward from a budget.
Yeah, you're consuming a service from someone else.
And so it's just dollars out.
Yeah.
Right. So I think both I think services always live in it's just a very simple financial model. Like you're either paying regularly or you're paying as you go.
Yeah.
But in neither case, is there some other accounting shenanigans you need to worry about?
Yeah, look, when we get into enterprise, you run into that. So if we pivot to storage for a second, right? Like with our storage as a service thing, I'll give kind of a few data points. One, you could buy 100 terabytes of storage, you could pay for it, and you could pay. So there's a capital purchase, right? You're spending, let's say, 100K for 100 terabytes. Just very easy math, right? And then you might pay 30K a year for some subscription service and upgrade and all of that, right? Which is what our Evergreen Forever is.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right? So you're paying for your hardware being updated and whatever, and that's hardware as a service, right?
Sure.
So you've got 100K upfront and 30K annually over whatever 3 years, right? So, but if you think about the 100K, do you need the 100 terabytes upfront? Because when we look at our data, we have a lot of fleet data. We have over 15,000 customers phoning home and et cetera. And we look at our fleet. Most customers by year 3 are using about 45% of what they bought, right? Because you're estimating what you need when you start.
Right.
So if you think about, like, let's say that 100K you're depreciating, right? So let's say you have 3-year depreciation, just for simple math. So you paid 100K up front and you got 30K a year. So you're putting 100K on your balance sheet and you're depreciating 33K a year.
Yeah.
So it's actually hitting your P&L and expense at 30K for the service and another 33 is depreciation. So you're 63 out annually, right?
Yeah, and by the way, just because I think that stuff's very obvious to you, I'm just gonna regurgitate what I think you said in more simple terms. All depreciation means is from think about when you're doing your taxes, a depreciation would count as a cost that you paid, and it'll show up literally on your taxes. So even though you paid $100,000 on day one. From your perspective of costs, it would appear as if you had costs in $33,000 in year 1, $33,000 in year 2, $33,000 in year 3.
You're spreading the cost.
And so you spread the cost, and so then if, let's say you had profits or income or whatever, it would offset those year by year. So, but in reality, like you no longer have $100,000.
Yeah, your cash is out.
Your cash is out, right?
Right. So your balance sheet, you've debited $100,000, and then you work it into your operating expense in your P&L. Is $33K a year for 3 years.
And now you have to add in that operational expense of the
service.
Hardware service.
Yeah, the hardware service plus the depreciation is your total OpEx out.
Yep.
So in that case, for that 100 terabytes, you're doing $63K a year.
Yep.
Now, if you are buying...
For a thing that I may not only use half of by the end of it.
Well, what our data tells us is you use 45% by the end of it.
By the end
across the fleet. That's just data, right? That's fact. So now if you assumed, hypothetically, you're buying the service, right? You could buy 10 not this year, 30 next year, and 45. Like, you can grow as you need, or you can just say, I'm going to reserve 45,
okay.
Right? So let's say I'm going to reserve 45. On a service, because it's hardware, we will ship you more. We'll ship you headroom above it. You have 25% buffer on top of that. But you bought 45.
Yeah, and that's just for simple math is to say it costs you $45K to get 45%.
So that's $45K a year, hypothetically.
Yep.
Right? So, and the pricing's better than that, but let's say it's $45K.
Right.
So, in essence, that's cheaper.
Yeah, because actually 2 things happened, right? You didn't spend $100K up front.
So you retain your cash.
Right. And by the way, it's actually more like, and then in that first year, you normally spend $130K, right?
Yeah.
And then you retain your cash. And then from before you were spending, from a book's perspective, $66K per year. Now you're spending $45K per year. So
and typically you're buying, in the first scenario, your 100 plus your 30, that extra 90, you're all paying it up front because you're typically buying product plus 3 years of support.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So you're paying 190 in cash flow out.
On the first year.
Right? And your OpEx is 63 a year.
Interesting.
Right? So from a financial lens, I don't know why anyone would not go service. It makes no sense financially.
Right.
Just without any other value. Right? Now, what's fascinating is how this business came about. So let's do a little bit of a historic, like I didn't actually invent Evergreen One.
Right.
It was done by someone in our BU, Arnab, who's sitting outside, is a deal contract for a customer where a customer was asking about financing, and we're like, hey, we could probably do this, and we could retain the asset, and if you don't need to buy a lease, because if we retain the asset, and it all started with basically financials. There was no operational, technical, anything. It's just like, this is a piece of paper to deal with a different way of buying and billing.
Exactly. So it was all, I mean, as an engineer, I'm going to call it accounting shenanigans.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I'd give it a little bit more than that, but yes, I'm sure Arnab would take umbrage. He's like, there was genius in my paper, right?
Well, I mean, I'm not belittling the genius. I'm just saying it manifests in, the people who do P&Ls and taxes and things like that.
Yeah, paper. But again, there's value in that, the business was built on that premise, right? But when you take a look, we said, hey, there's a difference between a subscription and a service. Why would we want to turn that why weren't we good there? Why did we decide to say, okay, let's convert the subscription to a service? Like, what is the reason to do that?
I actually don't have I think, by the way, I think you drove a lot of that. So I've watched some of the values come out of it. So I can maybe explain some of the goodness of making that change. I actually don't know why we did. Like to me, I was kind of a passenger on this experience, right? It was like, okay, I saw it as the financial vehicle. Mm-hmm. I always saw and I'm thinking about Pure Storage here. So you described that hardware as a service, this Evergreen forever model where you buy it, but we'll maintain it essentially forever as long as you maintain your hardware service, right? Yeah. I always thought that was pretty good. And so Evergreen One has gone way beyond that, and we can get into some of those if we want to, but I wouldn't have had a desire to go build it because I didn't see it. I didn't understand it.
Well, look, I'll give you my thesis in terms of why I thought about it that way, right? I come from and worked in software. And I've noticed one thing is hardware companies think software is great and hardware sucks. And software companies think software sucks and SaaS is great. Everyone thinks grass is the greener on the other side,
exactly.
Right? So I started in software, and I'm like, how do I move SAP to SaaS? And then I looked at Salesforce. I'm like, what is Salesforce doing? Because SAP was building on-premise software, and Salesforce was the first really successful SaaS company on the planet, basically, right? And they're like, okay, instead of thinking about business systems, let's think about sales reps and how they manage contacts. Okay. So the entire Salesforce.com started with sales reps paying on their credit cards for managing their contact lists.
That's mind-boggling.
It wasn't opportunities. It wasn't CRM.
Really?
The initial thing was, how do I have somewhere online to maintain my contacts?
It was a sales team Rolodex?
Yep.
Okay, I didn't.
V1 of SFDC was Rolodex, right? And you forget, right now we take contact management for granted with Gmail and whatever, but there was a time when Rolodex was a problem.
Yeah. I mean,
keeping track of, we had address books, exactly. And we used to write down contacts, and people used to have business cards.
Exactly.
And you used to have inserts for business cards 100%. Across your customer meetings, yep. Right? So
it's in our vocabulary, right? The fact that it's there, it was a real thing, right?
Yeah. So, but they evolved and said, okay, now that I have this user base, what more value can I provide to them? They're like, well, they're not just maintaining contacts, they're having opportunities. That's called an opportunity. So they created the construct of an opportunity in a CRM system.
Wow.
And then, they're like, and if you fast forward, I don't know, this is probably 25 years later now, right? The principle of it versus software is software, the moment it installed, depreciates or gets old.
Yeah, exactly.
It's old day two. SaaS, the longer it runs, the more you get. It's newer.
Yeah.
Right? So your value is not software lifecycle management, patching, upgrading, getting new features. When you are getting a service, it gets better over time. For your same unit rate economics,
you're getting a better thing.
You are getting a better thing.
Yeah.
That's why I would call Evergreen Forever hardware as a service. I was like, oh, Pure already has a service. Because for the same dollar, your hardware is getting better over time. You're getting more performance,
True.
like newer density, whatever you're getting, right?
Yep.
So Pure had built a service before I even joined the company. I was like, oh shit, we do hardware as a service.
And we didn't realize it.
We didn't realize it. Like, you know what I mean? We didn't call it that,
Yeah.
right? But that's what we did,
Interesting.
right? And then, so I take a look at like SaaS. I'm like, well, you can do that in SaaS because it's the cloud. You control your software. There's no like distribution thing. So like you would never think that SaaS makes sense in hardware.
Yeah.
Because the moment you put the hardware there, it gets older. But I'm like, wait, this company's already solved that problem,
Interesting.
right? How do you make it better? How do you make that? So we already had before Evergreen One hardware as a service,
That's true. Yeah.
right? How do you make it better? And one of the things that happened like I saw two patterns. One is Nest. Is Nest a device or is it a service?
Yeah, and by the way, now I'm having a little bit of heartbreak because it's dying. Like
Google's killing
something
it.
that I
But
love.
like before the recent death, right? Like, or projected death,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
Yeah, I actually think that's interesting. It's a service. I'd never thought about it that way, but it's a thing that is essentially because you're talking about the thermostat Nest.
Yeah.
It's trying to take something. It's your like home environment. It's like your ambient air, right? And it's trying to learn things about you, and it's getting better. And I'm gonna give you a better HVAC experience. It sounds like the most boring thing ever, but it turns out to be really cool.
And it's hardware. There's a device in your home.
Device in your home.
So what, my thing was like, okay, so SaaS doesn't have to be cloud. SaaS can be endpoint management, meaning you can have physical devices that you are
Yeah.
treating like SaaS endpoints.
Yes.
Nest has proven that to me. That was actually part of the thesis, right? I was like, it's proven that's
Great
possible.
app. You learn about.
And then later on, after we did this, Tesla was coming in out about the same time, and they were doing the thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like iCloud was kind of trying to do that with an iPhone.
That's true.
Right? So and then Apple added Apple One, which is the device replacement program. They added a financial vehicle after they built the service experience,
Interesting.
which was iCloud and App Store.
Right.
Right? Like, yes, there's a physical device, but who cares about the physical device?
just want
It's the App Store and the apps that make the iPhone interesting.
100%.
No, the device, yes, there's a nicer camera and there's some newer hardware and whatever,
Yep.
right? But that approach started existing there. It started approaching there. So I was like, okay, we can go further than hardware as a service if we can provide endpoint management to storage. That was the initial thesis. Had no idea what the value would be of that operational service.
Interesting. And when we say endpoint management, it's like sort of like stop thinking about this hardware. Like we'll take on more and more of that.
To meet the service principle for the same unit economics, how is it getting better over time? That's it.
Okay.
That's the only thing. Like for me, a definition of a service is for my subscription fee, I'm getting better over time.
Interesting.
Like operationally.
Yeah. And okay. That's your definition? Because by the way, like we can go back to my Dollar Shave Club example, right? I pay the same amount or I pay more over time and it's kind of the same. It hasn't really gotten any better.
And I would argue that eventually you'll leave Dollar Shave Club.
Yeah. That's
right.
I've thought about it. That's true.
You've thought about it. Like, so that's a bad service.
That's a bad service.
Like it's a service, but it's a bad service.
Yeah.
Right. And if you learn anything from SaaS companies, right, they continue to innovate to keep you on their platform.
Yeah.
They continue to make it for your unit rate economics. They add more and it gets better, right? Because a subscription business, just as a business leader, previously in CapEx, I've sold the money. Everything's your problem after that. Like, yes, I'm collecting my maintenance fee, whatever, but it's your problem.
Right.
In a service, I need to keep you on my platform because you can leave any time.
Yep.
You know what I mean? You can end your service when you're done with your service.
Yes.
Like there's no sunk cost.
It's actually really interesting that you put it that way because by that definition, let's think about, because I mean, in the enterprise world, I think 100% companies think this way and they expect this, right? Because I think they just have a higher bar.
Yeah.
We as consumers are getting subjected to crappy services. Now you put it that way. Because I was like, wait a minute, my Netflix is getting more expensive and I get ads. Like the service gets worse like over time. This is terrible.
Their way of saying we're getting better is more content.
Yeah, but even that they've started coming. Anyway, I just want to point out, like, as consumers, like, hey, hold on, we're not getting what we signed up for. Like Amazon Prime originally, it's its argument was, hey, you pay for Amazon Prime, it gets better over time. Now it covers video.
Yeah.
Now it covers audio. Now you can go
And they violated the principle, and now Apple TV is building quality content
That's fair.
and trying to sell you a service that
With Apple One, yeah.
with Apple One, right? Like, so, like, I think this is just the nature. If from a longevity of companies that win and companies that lose, this is a principle that I believe you need in operational,
Interesting.
right? Now the next thing is what are we going to offer operationally for storage?
Right.
So the next step, and this was kind of early days, we actually had Vipul was one of our product managers in our deal desk, right? At the time he was in the BU as the product manager for Evergreen One, and Jonas and some of these people, right? And there I was like, guys, what? And that was kind of my journey into joining this group, right? Was what can we do to evolve from financial to operational and experience?
Yeah.
Like that was the challenge, right? And to do operational, we assigned someone saying, go to Glassdoor, look up storage admin as a job profile, and tally the skills that they write on their thing.
Okay.
Because if you think about Uber, and eventually Uber taking over the world, or smart driving cars taking over the world, you're removing the skill set of the person needing to drive,
That's an interesting way to think about it.
right?
Yeah.
So your value operationally is you've shifted driving from you to me.
Yeah. You don't,
Right?
You don't even need the skill.
You don't need the skill.
Yeah.
So operationally, it's not that the thing doesn't exist. Driving still exists.
Right.
You're just taking it over as a vendor.
Right.
You're shifting the work. So, and this was used in the early days of Amazon and the cloud, when people were trying to define cloud, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service.
Now you're talking about Amazon Web Services.
Amazon Web Services, right? In the early days of that, there was this analogy called pizza as a service. So their CapEx is like baking pizza at home. You're going to the grocery store, you're procuring the ingredients, you're firing up the oven, you're doing dishes, you're cooking, you're eating, that whole thing.
You actually need
Every step of the way,
You need an oven.
you're
You need a
buying
kitchen.
unit economics, and you're doing everything.
Yeah.
Right? When you move to infrastructure as a service, you're moving one step to the right. And what is one step to the right?
You might go to a community kitchen, maybe.
Well, it's probably like Papa Murphy's or Costco pizza.
Okay, fair.
You're like buying a frozen pizza,
Yeah.
but you're still cooking it. You're still, doing the dish. Now, someone had to make the pizza. All the work's the same. The cheese, tomatoes, all the ingredients are there. It's just someone else pre-assembled that, gave it to you, but you're doing the rest in the value chain.
Yeah, that's fair.
When you move to platform as a service, it's like Domino's. You're still doing dishes. You're still serving the pizza, but like it's cooked. You're not firing up the oven.
Yeah.
And when you're going to software as a service, it's like eating at a restaurant, right? So like that picture, if you Google pizza as a service, has been on the internet for 25 years.
Okay.
Like in the early days, because I grew up in the early days of software to SaaS when people were trying to describe this.
Right.
I didn't write that. Someone else wrote that. I just know that was the way people talked about it in the early days of Salesforce. Like, how do you figure out what IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS is?
Right.
Right? So, okay, we have this financial thing. So maybe we've taken off, like if you move it into the pizza analogy, we've taken off like managing capital depreciation, and we've taken some work away from you.
Right.
But it's financial work, not operational work.
Yep.
So what is operational work for storage? The easiest way to find that out is go to Glassdoor and look at skills of storage admins.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
And we manage performance, we manage replication, we manage HA and DR, and eventually cyber resilience. Like words come up on the skill. If you give that to a software engineer, like you are an architect, and it's like, okay, we sell this storage system. We publish APIs. Build me something that takes that activity away from the end customer.
Yeah.
That
gives them the outcome they want. They don't have to do anything.
Right.
Yeah.
That invented the concept of performance management SLAs and capacity management, because like people used to do that.
Yeah. So it'd be like they had to monitor the thing to make sure it's going to behave the way that it needs to behave, and then buy something or make a hardware change to maintain it and all that. And you're saying, no, don't worry about that. Just tell us how it needs to behave and we'll do all the rest of it for you.
Yeah.
Well, right. Well,
So we've shifted the work.
Yeah.
Now, it's not just about shifting of work, but if you think about this from a macroeconomic point of view, right? One, who's going to be better? Someone we train as a storage admin on how to do performance management for FlashArray, or Pure Storage doing performance management for FlashArray?
Yeah.
Who's going to be better at it?
us.
Right. So one, you're developing centralized expertise. And if it's the same, let's say we did bodies, not technology for this performance management.
Right.
It's just like, instead of you doing it, like 5,000 customers doing performance management, we as a vendor do it on behalf of 5,000 customers with the body shop.
Yep.
Those people are doing it day in and day out. So this is like human learning, not machine, but it's reinforcement human learning.
Yeah.
They will get really good at performance management.
Sure. Yep.
So you're ultra specializing. So you're creating a higher outcome for everybody, even if the cost was the same,
Yep. That's true.
right? By moving to vendor manage. Then you move that to software and technology, and it's more predictable than humans.
Yep.
And then you add AI to do it, and you get even better.
Well, and I think the reason you have to move it to automation is that otherwise you can't get better, because like one of your theses was, okay, it has to get better for the same unit economics. If you have to make it better, but you have to hire a bunch of people to make it better, like it's going to cost more. And so,
Well, but the unit economics is right. So if I'm charging you 10 cents a gig, I can also afford to hire more people linearly.
I see. Yeah.
So that's why SaaS companies very rarely become profitable if they're building on Amazon.
Because their costs are
Their costs scale with their data or their people.
Right. And so yeah, so I guess you're agreeing with me. I guess maybe at some point you need to
Bend the curve.
and
right? That's where automation helps,
Yep.
right? And that's how you build profitability in a SaaS business,
Yep.
right? Or you just reinvest that to keep making the service better,
Yeah.
right? So that's the second phase of operational. But we actually brought our Pure One team together because the last step is the experience, right? If I have a service and it keeps getting better over time, how do I set what I want? Do I need to still call somebody and be like, hey, I need 70,000 IOPS? Like,
Right.
what do I do? No, you need to give customers self-service from an experience standpoint to have a service experience.
Yep.
So in Salesforce, you can go in and be like, I can enter my opportunity. It's a portal. Like, it's a website. You know what I mean? So there is the nature of every SaaS service. Most services I can think of have a GUI of some sort.
Yep.
Nest has one. You know, like I'm trying to think of a service that doesn't have a GUI. Uber has a car, right? There might be one. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? But like if you wanted Barber as a service, you would probably have an app that's like, Barber, I'm here. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like there needs to be a service management experience, right? And that service management experience needs to think about shortening the time. And this is where the public cloud got it right. You want S3, spin it up. You want EC2, spin it up. Like instantaneous value proposition.
Yes, agreed.
So your North Star on financial is moving to consumption economics, right? Your North Star on operational is get better over time at lower unit economic rates. And your North Star on experience is instantaneous satisfaction.
Yes.
Like those three things are the North Star of a service. Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, this was just your thesis coming in because that's how you've seen things done out there? I mean, because I mean, you asked me, I think you started this whole discussion on a little bit on, you know, how would I think about turning a financial model into a service? I would have thought of none of that. And so this is just.
Well, and I think this is what's happening right now. It's funny. I was talking to some folks at Gartner about this, right? Like, I'm like, why is this so hard for hardware companies? Right? Like, I'm like, why do our competitors suck so much? Was basically the question I was asking, because this seems fairly trivial. And I think in a previous podcast, we talked about neurodivergence. Like, are you a specialist in an area? In storage, typically you have specialists that come from chips and Cisco and hardware and whatever,
Yeah.
right? And that is not my background.
Right.
I have zero background there. But in the background I come from, where I had to deal with software lifecycle management, I'm like, God, patching software sucks. Upgrading software sucks. Getting new features suck. Like, you know what I mean? I was like, I envied SFTC for SaaS. You know what I mean?
Right.
I was like, I wish I had SaaS. And then I built a SaaS portfolio.
Right.
Right. this is common sense in that ecosystem.
Interesting.
So like all I did was take something I saw elsewhere and apply it to this domain.
That's really
I didn't invent anything. I didn't learn anything. None of this is unique. It's applying a well-known principle in a different industry to this industry.
Yep.
Right? And I think the reason people struggle is they're starting with a financial vehicle.
Yep.
And they think that, and they're like, lease, and then how do you pay? And like,
Yep.
they're trying to optimize, like what I see happening in the hardware world is they're optimizing hardware. And some of the other vendors are trying to copy our term sheets operationally to create fake SLAs, but then they're letting their lawyers at it,
Yeah.
saying, and exclusions apply for planned maintenance. And because if you didn't have, and this was one of the key things that made this possible for us, the Evergreen architecture.
Yeah.
If you didn't have hardware as a service, none of this would be possible. Right? So just kind of lucked into that, I guess, as a company.
You're like, wait a minute, the hard part, the reason why it can't work is because it's the hard part. And then you're like, oh, that part's solved.
The rest is easy.
That's fascinating.
Right.
But actually what's been super interesting about this conversation has been, I'm now actually a little bit angry about a bunch of the services that I quote unquote have. And I'm just like, oh man, like I don't think even my software services aren't giving me this value chain, right? Yeah. I wonder if we're going to start seeing a weird churn, because I think a lot like the SaaS world has kind of taken over, right? I mean, consumers get things as a service now. Like you have your DoorDash subscription, you have your Netflix, you have whatever, right? But I think what I'm seeing in the industry is now people are starting to start to optimize the finances side of that, which means they're saying either to your customer, to get the same thing, you need to pay me more, or for the same unit economics, I'm going to give you less. And both of those violate a fundamental thesis.
And that's where the industry is ripe for disruption. If you take a look right now, everyone thinks SaaS is going to get disrupted first by AI. Like that's like every industry analyst report, like the place where the comeuppance is happening is in SaaS, right? And the reason being is those things. People are violating the first principles of operational unit economics and value, right? And I would pay, like, for me, yeah, I like enjoy TV. Like I'm okay having a Prime and a Netflix and multiple subscriptions, fine.
Right.
It's the experience that's broken. I was like, dude, wait, I want to watch this show. Where do I go? And then I'm like, Apple TV and Roku and other people have tried to do like the search of search.
Yeah.
It still kind of sucks.
Exactly.
Right? It's like, oh, and it could be over here and you could do this thing. And then like, you got to like link together all these subscriptions into this thing. And like, It's a pain in the ass to set up. It's like the user experience is kind of fragmented. I'm like, I remember when cable just had everything. Like the experience of cable was actually better. The content choices weren't, right? And flexibility, but the experience was actually somewhat better.
Yeah.
And now okay, I'm federating recommendations and it doesn't know what I like across services.
I never thought about that.
And like, you know what I mean? You're just kind of like, okay, this is all bullcrap.
Yeah.
At some point, there's someone will create like a ChatGPT front end saying, I want to watch something like this, and you won't even know. And there might be a new interface that takes an experience improvement approach to TV.
Yeah.
Right? It's ripe to be disrupted as a segment.
I mean, as a consumer, I want that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but I think the same thing, like, why isn't the same thing true for storage? Because like now, I'm telling you our thesis, but by and large, most people are still buying the old way. Most people are still like happy doing what they're doing. What's wrong with the thesis?
Well, so no, I think it's a great thesis, but I think it's piece of the puzzle. So I think the storage piece of the puzzle, I think we've done a great job on. Personally, one of the things, and this is something we've both been looking at. At the end of the day, you also need compute, you need networking. I think we need the traditional pillars of infrastructure to kind of catch up. I'm starting to see some of that in the field. I think there's some companies working on this, but I think that it's not obvious to everyone that when you go to AWS and get, or Azure Cloud or whatever, you're paying for an outcome, right? You're saying, I just want to be able to deploy my new web front end and so on, and I don't want to worry about any of this infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And I think we've tried to provide a lot of that for what has traditionally been thought of as hardware infrastructure. Mm-hmm. I think once we have a full stack solution, something that's both compute, networking, even a data center power. Like if I'm someone who's running a business and I just want to run a web service and I don't want to be beholden to I pay AWS more for every customer I get, I do want my own infrastructure because it'll help me with those, be profitable. But I don't want to think about it. I just want to be able to run my service in my own data center that I
Well,
can
I think you went on that journey with our infrastructure project. Why don't you describe what you learned?
Yeah, and so that's exactly what we're trying to struggle with right now is like, okay, we want to essentially run our own services and our own infrastructure. And I don't really want to tell you what the answer is yet, but I will say the parts that I got frustrated by was first question would come up is like, okay, where are you going to run this? Be like, oh God, I don't know, a data center? Like, okay, and it's like, what geo? I'm like, oh man, and like, how many racks do you need? So many questions I don't care. And then it's like, okay, what's in the rack? Okay, well, what kind of compute node do you want? I want to run Kubernetes. Like, I don't know. I could tell me how many vCPUs I need. And then it's like, okay, what about your networking? What about inbound network needs? Does it have to have outbound? Is it going to connect to AWS? Like, what about firewalls? And I'm just like, oh my God, the number of technical details I had to go answer to get infrastructure that matches what is essentially just a cloud Kubernetes cluster was just annoying. Yeah. And then if we went and actually bought that, we'd have to spend millions of dollars on day one just to eventually reap the reward in year 3 or 4, right? Mm-hmm. That just sucked. It's like just an annoying experience. And yeah, I could go through all of that. Mm-hmm. But I really think there's something better. And so we've been trying to work with people on how do we get something that's better? Like, just tell me what you're trying to run. Nowadays you're running a Kubernetes cluster. It needs some CPU load, some network needs. Just tell me the basics and we'll take care of the rest. And we'll make it actually financially beneficial to you to go down that path, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a journey that I'm going on right now.
Yeah. So look,
I don't want to show my cards there yet.
Yeah, that's fair, right? So what was fascinating to me is I've been hunting for other people to like share stories with and like go down this journey. I'm like, we can't be the only ones in infrastructure trying to do this thing.
Right.
And for 4 years, I couldn't we meet people, we talk to people all the time, talk to peers, and it's like, no one's doing it. I see all like our competitors trying to copy all the stuff with financial leases, but I don't see anyone really understanding the problem set. But we met a company actually recently, Now Secure, that I thought like when we met them,
they're cool.
I was, so this is a plug to Now Secure, explain what they do, because I thought they were trying to do exactly what we were trying to do.
Yeah, they're doing, unfortunately they're focused on a different problem area, but so for anybody who works in an office building, you probably have not thought about this, but if you have Wi-Fi in your building, it is actually a really, really complicated infrastructure setup. Like in the ceiling, there's going to be Wi-Fi access points. Like if anyone's in an office building right now, like just look up, there's probably one in the room you're in. There's one right here. I can see it. And they're distributed. You have to buy those. You have to place them. Then they connect into switches, and there's like cabling all over the place. You have to understand. It's a very similar infrastructure experience. Like I have to understand what kind of Wi-Fi. I just want Wi-Fi that works in my building, right? And to do that, I have to map out my building, figure out where to place stuff. If something doesn't work, I have to understand why people are complaining, or maybe like something is not meeting the load. Now Secure is like, screw all that. Just tell us how many users you have. Tell us the size of your place. We'll map it out for you. We'll make a recommendation of where to place it. We'll add monitoring so that we can tell when something's not behaving correctly. When they even have a portal where people can report issues so that they can triangulate on where the problem is. They can make adjustments from the cloud. They manage the hardware. They update it remotely. Like you just literally say, I want Wi-Fi in my building, and they take it from there.
Yeah, it's Wi-Fi as a service. So we're seeing at least some signs that the servicizing of the infrastructure world is happening.
Yeah. By the way, they do this not with bodies, right? Because I think a lot of people will be like, well, I can pay somebody and they'll do all that for me. Yeah, they just would have done all the dumb hard work for you.
Yeah.
A company like Now Secure is doing it by building better infrastructure.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and like their onboarding experience was fascinating
cool
too, right? So, normally because yes, it's more than outsourcing. I would argue service is more than outsourcing.
Yeah, it's building a better product.
Yeah.
And I think that's a key aspect of it.
Yeah. So, it's an interesting conversation. Hopefully that helped you understand a little bit of our journey, why we're, excited about this service transition and journey. But Naveen's going to be actually sharing a lot of it at our Accelerate conference next week. So Naveen, any final words? What do you want people to walk away from? Any teasers of things you're going to share next week?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe when you look at what we're doing, I think it's basically trying to give you a better experience, right? And solve for the things, your outcomes. So like, I think the simplest example was that Wi-Fi one. You want Wi-Fi in your building. Like you don't care about all these other annoying questions. You want outcomes. And that's what we're trying to deliver. And I'd say this conversation has made me just say, like, it's like a public service announcement. Like, let's, as a community, just be more irritated about the services that we consume. Like, we're not getting good services. It's annoying.
Yeah. So demand more.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.